This past week, I had a few experiences that reminded me of one of the parables from one of the teachings from the Lotus Sutra, which most of you know, very important, probably the most influential sutra in Mahayana Buddhism, Zen. And the title of that sutra is Great Treasure is Very Near. And it's the title of my talk today, the eighth parable. And that parable is recounted in this way. A poor man visiting the home of a good friend, who was a rich man, became drunk and fell asleep on the floor. The host, having to leave in order to take care of some business, sewed a priceless jewel into the robe of his sleeping friend and then went off to do his errands. After a while, the poor man woke up and gathered his things and left. He went to another town where he had great difficulty earning enough for sufficient food and clothing. And eventually he happened to run into his old friend again, the rich man, who promptly scolded him and then explained that he had given him a jewel so that he would not have to struggle so much. The rich man called him a fool for not making use of this hidden treasure. We're told that the Buddha is like that rich friend. He reminds us of good roots planted long ago for all of us. The poor man represents those who are already satisfied with what little they have already attained, and they simply do not realize that in reality, they are bodhisattvas who will attain awakening. The central lesson of this parable, then, is that the greatest treasure is never far off, but intimately close to each of us, although we may not know we already have it. In Zen, we are often reminded through stories and teachings from the Buddha, our ancestors, old crones alongside the road, and all of our current teachers, that each of us already has within us everything that we need. Abilities, skills, talents, strengths, potential, powers, so on. All of these things with which to do the Buddha's work, to enter the Bodhisattva way on the way to becoming a Buddha. And this is, in fact, one of the main themes of the Lotus Sutra, that all beings have the potential to become Buddhas. These may be, some of them, abilities and potential that we don't know about yet, about ourselves, or maybe we have not yet utilized. And in the last two talks, we discussed crossing over to the other shore, this metaphor in Buddhism of leaving behind our delusions and resulting suffering from our delusions, and stepping across a bridge or the water to the other side, the other shore of awakening. And we also learned that the other shore is, of course, this very shore. This shore on which we stand, but with greater clarity due to our continuing practice. So these talents and these abilities and this potential are what we might discover about ourselves as we journey on this path, as we cross the bridge step by step toward the other shore. And we've started on a path of discovering ourselves, our inherent Buddha nature, and sometimes in surprising ways. So this inherent Buddha nature, this potential that we have to become a Buddha or to become Buddha-like, is not something we have to go about trying to earn. We have all received it naturally, and it cannot be destroyed nor taken from us. It already belongs to us. Gene Reeves, in his book, Stories on the Lotus Sutra, says it is our rightful inheritance. And we can, and perhaps we must, have faith in this. Faith in our potential, faith in ourselves, faith in the Dharma as the path of awakening. And in this parable, which is often called the gem in the ham, which makes me feel like I'm reading a Dr. Seuss book. But in this parable of the gem in the ham, we also can see the rich man as a bodhisattva for someone else. In this case, the poor man. And this is true for each of us. It is possible and necessary for us to share in the Buddhist path of awakening others, not only ourselves, which is a very important aspect, as you know, of Mahayana Buddhism. However, helping others is not merely helping others. It also contributes to our own enjoyment of life also. It enriches us in many ways. And this is an important aspect of the Lotus Sutra in general. It encourages us to look for and cultivate the good, both in ourselves and in others. I mentioned at the beginning that I had some experiences or interactions actually this past week that reminded me of some of the teachings in the Lotus Sutra. And I was supporting a friend specifically who recently had what we thought would be an outpatient surgical procedure, but it ended up that she stayed in the hospital that night, which was good. And I called her the following morning from her house where I was staying, and, just to see how she was doing, how she got through the night. And during our conversation, she asked if I would delete some recordings on her TV, so there'd be space for new recordings during the day. So I turned on the TV as I had her on the phone, and I found her list of recordings, and I started to delete them as she told me to. Each one, I was telling her as I was deleting them. And she also, several times during this conversation, told me emphatically, do not delete this one and this one, these two recordings, which had a lot of episodes, lots, like 100. So a moment later, I'm on the phone to her and I went, oh. And she said, what? And I said, oh, well, you have 14% freed up space now. And she went, wait a minute. The ones I told you to get rid of should give me about 1 to 2% of freed up space. Not that much freed up space. And as she was talking, I'm seeing the 14% go to 16%, and then 22%, and then 28%. And I was a bit in a panic because I couldn't do anything, and then I noticed what was happening. Over here, these two shows that she had recorded with, like 100 in each. The episodes were just ticking away, being deleted, just tink, 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 tink. And, just the two shows that she told me not to delete. So I turned off the TV, hoping that it would stop this purge. When we finished our conversation and hung up, and then I turned it back on, and it was still going. So I was feeling so anxious about this. Somehow I'd done exactly what she asked me not to do. And this is something I've known for a long time. You don't touch that stuff, those two shows, you do not touch them. So these programs, were not supposed to be deleted. And this whole situation might seem trivial, but I knew right away, by the way I was feeling, that this was really a response of mine to past reactions between us, past scoldings maybe, or past disapprovals, maybe not just between her and me. But I spent the rest of that morning trying to get those dang recordings back, talking DirecTV, doing whatever I could do. I could not. So a few hours later, I picked up my friend from the hospital and we drove back to the house. And after she got settled in her chair and she was doing well, I sat right near her and leaned over and looked at her, and I said, I'm so glad, everything went so well, but I have a little bit of bad news. And she said, what? What? Thinking it was something quite bad. And, I was feeling really anxious about this, but then I just blurted it out. I said, the recordings that you didn't want me to delete are gone. And she just looked at me, and I said, completely gone. I can't get them back. She had a rather stern face for a few moments, and she was thinking about this. And I was saying, I'm so sorry, I don't really know what happened, and I was explaining it to her. I tried this, and that. And she just looked at me, and she got a smile on her face, and she said, don't worry about this. This is a TV program. That's not important in life. Let it go. Don't even mention it again. Now, this is not at all what I expected. I really was standing there sort of getting ready to be scolded. And why am I telling you this? Well, for me, it felt like a moment that, first of all, we were both showing each other compassion. I mean, I know these are really important to her. And I was trying, apologizing, but, I hadn't expected this response from her at all. I had let myself make assumptions about how she would be, prejudicial assumptions. It was, as the Lotus Sutra teaches us, a moment, although it might seem trivial, of looking for and cultivating good, both in ourselves and in others, of recognizing the potential, the strengths, the talents, and so on, of the bodhisattvas standing right in front of us, and also recognizing our own. And we can't do that if we enter the space with our own preconceptions of what's going to happen. And we might find it easier to see ourselves in this way because we practice at it, don't we? We can maybe see these moments in ourselves. We practice showing up and noticing these preconceptions, these biases that can get in the way of being present. And we may notice if we are or we are not walking this bodhisattva path of compassion and wisdom and understanding. But do we also consistently recognize and allow to flourish this potential in all other living beings? Do we feel, see, and touch the gem in our own hem and in the hem of others? If we can stay open to this awareness, we benefit from compassionate teachings throughout the entire day, every day. To awaken to and realize our own potential, we can make a commitment to opening to the benefit from the potential residing in others. Another thing that came to my mind when I was in Hawaii. My sister and I were sitting near each other, and we received a text at the same time from my niece. And this text was very succinct and emphatic. And it said, "My house is flooded." And our minds each conjured up this image of, this is Hawaii, it had been raining a lot. So I have this image of water just running through the front door, and out the back door of her house. And so we called her, and it turns out that the toilet had leaked, and for hours. And it had flooded the entire house, except for one bedroom. So all the flooring, the cabinetry, the drywall, it all has to be replaced, except for one bedroom. And you get the picture. And I turned to my sister and I said, "Oh my gosh, how does a toilet flood like that? Unless it's clogged, of course," which she said it wasn't. But how does that even happen? And, I felt my words kind of going in this direction of blaming, how could this have happened? What actually did someone do or something? She just looked at me and she said, "I don't care why it happened or how it happened. I care about how they're going to handle it. What's the damage?" And I went, my big sis. The second arrow. You no doubt remember this teaching of the Buddha that we often bring suffering to ourselves by our reactions, the second arrow, to the misfortune, the the first arrow. And, good on you, says, that here again, the Bodhisattva and my sister, getting me back on track. And we all have gems in our hymns. All this hidden treasure, though, has no value until it's disclosed and it's used. And we are all, to some degree, bodhisattvas on the path to Buddhahood. And it's often said that the title bodhisattva should be seen as a term used to name a kind of activity, not a title. So just as a teacher who is not teaching is not really a teacher, a bodhisattva who does not do the work of the Buddha, that is, awakening in order to awaken others, is not truly a bodhisattva. And as Reeves suggested in his book, perhaps we should look at the term bodhisattva not so much as a noun, but as a verb. And the point of the story, in part, is as a way to emphasize the importance of embodying the Dharma in our lives, in our actions, and our behavior towards others. But as equally important to us is the idea that anyone can be a bodhisattva for us if we are open to seeing and experiencing others as bodhisattvas. The treasure has been given to us, just as the gem has been given to the poor man. It's up to us to make use of it and to recognize it in others. It is within us. The Buddha can't do it. He needs us to work for our liberation and for the liberation of others, recognizing the gem we all possess, the great treasure that is very near.